Hello, Deanna here, and thanks so much for being here. Today's video is a book review, and the book I'm reviewing is My Lady Jane by Cynthia Hand, Brodi Ashton, and Jodi Meadows. So in this book, we have these three authors coming together to write this very hilarious book. So I'm gonna read my little summary that I wrote. When these three authors get together, you can almost guarantee a novel loosely based on history, filled with interesting characters, witty dialogue, and a whole lot of cheekiness. In My Lady Jane, the ladies definitely deliver. Not only is the book loosely based on history, but they practically throw history out the window with the introduction of Eth-ians. The Eth-ians are humans able to transform into animals, which they are hunted and persecuted for. While Edward, the King of England, is dying, he declares his cousin, Lady Jane Grey, next in line for the throne, much to the chagrin of his older sister Mary. What Edward, Jane, and her new husband Gifford don't know is there are forces at play that could put their very lives in danger, and the fate of the country and Eth-ians lies in their very hands. So my thoughts on this one is I absolutely love this one. Absolutely, hands down. Really enjoyed this one. I loved so many of the different characters. I loved Edward and Gracie and G and Jane and Bess as well. They just all were very dynamic characters. They were very interesting. Some of them I wish I could have seen more of, but they were all really great and well written, and I absolutely loved all of these different characters. I had an almost automatic affinity for Jane herself and just the character that she is, especially when we are introduced to her right off the bat. And when we're introduced, Jane is just learning that she's getting married. Like, that is our introduction to Jane, is that she's finding out that she's getting married, and she's finding this out by her very blunt and not very sympathetic type character of her mother. So her mother is the one that is essentially just telling her that she's getting married in a very almost uncaring type of way. And honestly, I just related so hard with Jane, because Jane in that moment, all she really wanted to do was read her book. And she just was more interested in reading her book than whatever schemes her mom had going on. And we very shortly learn that Gifford, or known as G, the man that Jane is going to marry, is actually an Eth-ian who is a horse by day and a man by night. And there's a lot of rumors that surround him as well. So Jane has a lot of hesitation about her new husband, and we just have a big question mark about kind of what's happening between them. And she's pretty much thrown into this marriage very quickly, and it's something that other people have decided this fate for her. But G, though being very mysterious and being someone that Jane is pretty much betrothed to, in an arranged marriage, G became one of my favorite characters as well. He was an absolute delight. And then knowing a bit, or looking into a bit of the actual real history of Lady Jane Grey and her husband Gifford Dudley, my heart breaks for them. I mean, their story in itself is a very tragic story in what happened and all of the circumstances surrounding their lives and their deaths. And so in this story, the authors very much change history in very, very big ways. Some of it they do align with some of the history, but there is some points when they completely change history, because the real history of Lady Jane, who became Queen of England for 9 days, and her husband, is that they were tried with treason and ultimately beheaded. So that just horrible, considering that they were like, especially Jane was about 15 or 16 years old when this all went down. So she was just a young girl. She was just a teenager who was thrown into this conspiracy and all of these things and this rise to power through her greedy father and father-in-law, and she was the one that paid the ultimate price by being a young woman who just went along with this and became queen because she was the 5th in succession, and then Edward made her the next in succession, which her cousin, which was Edward's older sister, did not like. So that's all the real history. And then in this, it's changed so that we can see Lady Jane and G live a bit of a different life. And of course, the Eth-ians thrown in just really did completely throw history right out the window, which was just delightful to see in so many ways. And in some ways, it was nice to see G and Jane get a bit of a better rewriting in history. And honestly, just speaking of that and how much history changed, you really have to suspend your disbelief when reading this, because you literally have people turning into animals. So it's a bit of a fun, like, fantasy-like book based on history in certain ways, give or take. There's definitely some stretches to history and some all outright just complete changes to history, but there is some history that is underlying to kind of keep it on point and keep it tied to some of what actually happened in history. Overall, I absolutely loved the humor of this book. I thought the ladies' cheekiness and the humor of the authors just completely shone through in such a magnificent way in this book. I absolutely loved it from front to end. I thought it was really well written. It was a really engaging story. It kept me hooked. It kept me wanting to know more. I absolutely just loved the story. I loved the Edians and kind of the duality between how the Protestants versus the Catholics, which they're the verities in this, and kind of how that paralleled to what actually happened in real life, and just some of the persecution and everything that went on between these religions, which was encapsulated in the Eth-ians and the rarities, which is the like pure people that aren't animals compared to the ones that are animals, and just kind of how that plays out in that judgment and the persecution, prejudice, and all of that between that. So I thought that was a really interesting way to deal with the religious undertones of this book. Overall, I think I enjoyed this one even more than My Plain Jane. As much as I really enjoy My Plain Jane and I thought it was so fun and engaging, I found this one even more delightful. I absolutely loved the character of Jane, not only because of that affinity that I felt for her and like how we are introduced to her and thrown in, but just her as a person throughout this book, and just how much she grows to and learns and comes to trust those that she cares about and things, and just some of the things that happen without spoiling too much. I just love to see her character, and she was an awesome character, and I really related with her a lot in so many ways, and so I just really felt for her as a character and how she's thrown into these circumstances and everything, and it just made me, I think, like this book that much more, and because I really just felt that connection with Jane. And this is yet again written in third person point of view, like the My Plain Jane, with 3 different people's points of views that we're seeing. So we're seeing Edward's point of view, we're seeing Jane's point of view, and we're seeing G or Gifford's point of view. So we go through this adventure with all 3 of them, and it's just a delight to see them all and all of the character arcs and all of their transformations that they take on in this book, both literally and just in regards to their character arc. So was a very, very fun book to read. I absolutely love it. I want to get my hands on more because I know like they have My Calamity Jane and things like that. I believe My Calamity Jane gets back into the world of the Eth-ians, and I find that world building and that kind of storyline of the Eth-ians really intriguing. So I definitely want to get my hands on more of these books to see more of how that world and that storyline kind of plays out in that regard. So I'm definitely interested to see more. So other than that, there's so many twists and turns and just fun things in this book that I absolutely love it. I think it's one of my favorite reads of this year. I give this a 5 stars because I absolutely loved it. It's an amazing book. It's really fun. It's an interesting look at history and just kind of poking a little fun at history, but also trying to be a little respectful to the people that it actually happened. And honestly, the more I learn about the actual person, Lady Jane, and kind of her, everything that happened around her, it just makes me feel that much more for her. And I think that a book where she is well represented as a really dynamic, interesting, you know, smart and well written character is really deserving. And I'm really glad that this book was created in essentially a way to honor what really some of the tragedy that happened to her, and what this, having it in a bit of a different take on history, makes it a really interesting read and something I was really grateful to enjoy. So that is My Lady Jane. I think it was a really good book and I'm really glad I read it. So like I said, 5 stars for My Lady Jane. So that's it for this review. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, give it a like. And if you've read My Lady Jane, let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on it, kind of your take on what happened. And if you've read anything else by these 3 wonderful authors, I'd love to hear it, and any other books maybe that you have enjoyed of theirs. So thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, night, evening, whatever time it is, wherever you are. Thank you so much for being here. Take care of yourselves, and you will see me next time.